And then if you explore Fort Hill and you get out of your car and you actually walk the trails, you'll see little freshwater wetlands that exist. So that's a slightly different type of habitat with different critters living in it. And then you have the salt marsh, which is the Nauset Marsh system just beyond the boundaries of Fort Hill. And you have the red maple swamp, which is another completely different habitat altogether. So you have grassland, forest, salt marsh, swamp, freshwater wetlands, all kind of within about 100-acre area.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful mosaic for wildlife and also to just enjoy that part of Cape Cod.
We're interviewing Bill Burke, who is the Cape Cod National Seashore Park historian. And it concerns a historical landscape restoration on Fort Hill in Eastham. And this interests me particularly because I grew up in the area of Fort Hill, and I've been walking in that area for many years, since I was 9 years old. What is cultural landscape restoration?
Well, it's trying to bring back an area, a large acreage area, back to an earlier time.
Okay.
And in the case of Fort Hill, we're looking to return the look of that landscape to the way it looked in 1961, when the National Seashore was created.
Okay.
Primarily, what's being done is the clearing of some trees.
Okay.
The area was once very intensely cultivated for various agricultural purposes over the years, and essentially now the trees have grown in along the margins of the 100 acres or so of open fields.
I remember the fields to be basically of a pure field grass. What's the name of that kind of grass?
Well, there was a little blue stem grass, which is a native grass, which you'll find throughout the Fort Hill fields. But there's also been, probably since you've been walking out there, a lot of non-native species like oriental bittersweet that have begun to fill up some of the fields. So these are species that really don't belong there. That's something that you wouldn't have seen years ago. So we're also removing some of those non-native plants and vines and shrubs as well. And so that's part of the restoration.
What do you do with the wood that's being cut down? It's basically cedar, and is there anything else, any locust or?
A little bit of locust, a little bit of oak, but in the area that we've been clearing, it's been cedar. So what the park is going to do is a couple of things, because the cedar's beautiful. So we have left some alongside the road, and you'll see if you drive within the National Seashore, occasionally you'll see cut logs right on the edge of the road. And the park policy is that is for the public to take if they want to take it for burning purposes. Also, we do plan to use some of the longer poles that we haven't cut up that have just been debranched, and those will hopefully be reused in the Red Maple Swamp Boardwalk, which needs to be replaced.
Yes, it does.
And we also use red cedar poles in the dune areas of the park to put in some sand fencing. And again, some of those poles may be used for that. So it's a little bit for the public and a little bit for the park.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, because some friends of mine who are carpenters and woodworkers have talked about the use of the wood and bringing the wood back into some sort of an aesthetic form.
There's actually a National Park Service-wide program where trees, old trees that we call witness trees, trees that, for example, at the Battle of Gettysburg were there during the battle, and the photographs show the tree. And now the tree has declined and needs to be taken down. It has died. And there is a program where we're working with the Rhode Island School of Design to take some of those witness tree, the wood, and actually carve bowls or do other types of artwork with it. So potentially we could start a program where some of the older cedars or the old cottonwoods that are still there, maybe there's a connection with the arts there.
Yeah, I think there might be.
Both ecologists and historians are very aware of the fact that the landscape today is changing. It's foresting in many areas, but it's also interesting to note that ecologists are getting a greater appreciation of the human imprint on the land and really needing to know the past human history of any given area. On Cape Cod, there's only a few areas left where there's still an open landscape from that early colonial period. This is an area that was used by Native Americans for thousands of years, and then used intensely by the new European settlers from the mid-1700s through to the 20th century. So historians have looked at this area and have coined it a cultural landscape, a landscape that has a lot of features left from its earlier human past, both from the archaeology remains under the ground that you don't see, to the stone walls and the open fields and historic homes that are there today.
So there's a cultural aspect to these historical landscape restorations as well as an ecological one.
Right. So for the cultural side of the reason for doing this is to try to maintain the historic scene, so that the public can go to Fort Hill and understand how the area is used by humans. There were farm fields that were adjoining fields. They were split up by stone walls, and extended families, in particular the Knowles family early on, used those fields for farming and for grazing of livestock. But there's also kind of the ecological or natural side benefit that we like to talk about as well, in that these open grasslands are really actually quite, ironically now, quite rare on Cape Cod, and in fact in New England, all of these open grasslands, many of them are disappearing. So the birds that need that kind of habitat, that open grassland habitat, the meadowlarks and some sparrows, various types of insects, these creatures really thrive in that habitat, the native grassland habitat. And so their habitat is shrinking, as a whole. And so this offers much more wildlife diversity than you otherwise would have with just a forest cover.
Were you going to let them know or tell us where to?
Let the powers that be at the charter schools know that there'll be a load coming.
Yeah. Because my crew will come in, they'll just be two younger individuals, so they'll just want to raise it and dump it, right, wherever. So that's my goal.
Is there there's a back door to that building? Yeah. Okay, we'll just dump it outside the back door, so we can just go out and carry it in.
Okay, so we're done.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm off to get out of this uniform and put on other clothes and go to Hyannis.
Actually happened. Luke, that's just supposed to do one. I remember that.
Yeah, it looks almost like a star. Like
Yeah. I first thought of it as a four-leaf clover.
I'm sorry. Think about the shape of the wood and what it might suggest, and keep it really simple. These are very simple, abstract forms. So we're really, I think, going to get the best shapes if you just work with the shape you have. The bird in flight, now that's his idea. And when you think of a bird, you don't have to put both wings. I think this is called the whale. Look at it. It's just a simple shape.
What are those mini lobsters? They're called crayfish.
The kind that twist.
Okay.
how do you put that thing on again?
I think it's a better bite.
Claire?
The old saying is woodworking, is this way, you've got one end is cutting too much. These little screw things here will raise and lower the blade. Nice tool. Add up all of your ages, and this tool's probably still older than that. This is about the same sharpness as a surgeon's scalpel. If you drop this on your foot will not slow the blade down much. When you use it, you have one hand, if you're right-handed, put your right hand on here, then your left hand will steer. You can put a fair amount of force in it, but you don't want to try, see how easily this just slices. That's hard maybe, where you're working up and down. The nice thing about having the plywood So when you get to the end, you're going to take it like this with both hands and just go. So you're going to make a whale out of this. You want to probably taper it in, which means you're going to take, you'd have a lot of stuff to take out of here.
Where the back end is.
Well, you could sit here all day with a hammer and a chisel and dig it all out, but that'll take you a whole class to do it. What I do is do what's called wasting, which is you draw where you want it to remove it. You take a handsaw and you just saw down, and you just take the chisel and a mallet and whack it.
Yeah, it stops at the saw.
It stops the cut, and the wood just comes out in great big chunks. Now, instead of what you're doing now, is when you get to like, when it starts doing that, then just slice across. Get this flat.
Yeah, see, his fingers are farther back
This
than you have.
my hand right now is just steering. It's not doing, my hand's not doing anything. My fingertips are doing the work.
Yeah, that's it.
Try it that way.
How's it going?
Keep your fingertips a little back.
Look how pretty it
Hold on.
looks.
Yeah, so your arm goes in a straight line. And then it's a little bit here. Okay. Go for a little movement.
Hands back further, fingers an inch away from that edge. There you go. And that might be a little hard for her little hand, so maybe she needs to do that.
Very nice.
There you go. Sandy,
There
good.
you go. You got it.
You got it.
What are your comments or ideas about the fact that it was art that we used to demonstrate reciprocal appreciation?
That was your conduit to what you felt like you needed to do. It just comes from inside, and that's where it guided you, and look what happened. You educated children about it.
Yeah.
You got a lot of people involved in it.
Yeah.
And you sound like you made some beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
And what better way that life lives on. Some people are not connected whatsoever to anything outside.
Yeah, in the nature. We mostly live our lives, through TV or some kind of media, which is an abstraction. It's, many layers removed from the natural world. And I think that's probably why we don't have any sense of caring for it, because we
Right.
not.
Exactly.
You can't care for something you're not connected with.
All right, everybody, we're about to walk out to the site where we're gonna do a little circle. We're gonna do some of the movement stuff we did yesterday just to reorient ourselves at exactly what we're doing here. We're looking for the translation of nature's communications to us through its various gestures of sound and textures, everything around us. And we're going to do some exercises around how that translates into ideas for art. And we're going to do it through movement, because movement is the basis for all human communication and the basis for art. Come on, children.
I'm getting ideas, but it's not like it's not like nothing's coming.
Right, it's not really concrete.
They're brilliant. I'm not gonna help them.
So this is the whole area where the trees were cut.
Whoa, it's a gazebo.
And this is where Dick came and I came to, and we watched them burning trees and we watched them cutting, and they let him choose the wood that he wanted to do this project. So let's keep going. Yesterday we talked about ecology. And what did we say that ecology meant? That it has a Greek root, and what does that root mean? Yes.
It's like a home, a family.
Yes.
Like all together.
Yes.
Like nature is all just part of this big family.
Yes.
Working together.
That's right. Ecology means household, the Greek root of it. So yes, that means that the whole Earth, and not only the Earth but the cosmos too, is a part of one big family living in one big house. And we talked about the DNA and how all of life forms comes from the same DNA. The DNA structure. So we're all, again, another notion of understanding how we all are one family. And we talked about how indigenous people had a very intuitive and intimate relationship with nature, and how their expression of thanks to nature for the life that nature gave them and the guidance in life that nature gave them, they made art forms. And modern people look back and say, oh, look at this beautiful art. But to these people, this wasn't art. This was their way of organizing, expressing their life, social life, their spiritual life, and their biological life, what they had to do to stay alive. And they didn't have a such thing as art. Okay, but what do we talk about what humans do naturally? Yes.
Make art?
Yes. And remember how we talked about Homo sapien? Yeah, Homo sapien means humans with a good mind that think cleverly and judiciously. And remember how I said I had a friend who wrote a book. What was that called? Yes.
I remember.
Yes.
Homo aesthetics?
Yes, Homo aestheticus. Aesthetic meaning art, okay, the making of art. So a whole book writing on and showing how we humans, by very nature, make art. And that's part of the work that I do too. I wrote an article on that, and I talked about children developmentally, and I pointed out how the capacity to organize our world for humans is by its very nature is aesthetic. We do it aesthetically. We did some translating of things. We talked about how art is cross-modal, cross-sensory, how something that smells can have a color, or how a movement can have a music phrase, and things like that. So let's look around us and look at some of the gestures around us. There's wind gestures, there's color gestures, there's shape gestures. Someone may want to see something that they want to use to translate into a movement form that will communicate, as art does, communicate feeling states.
I really like that tree over there with like the branches near the bottom.
Right. So what kind of movement is that making? Moving that shape in ourselves. It doesn't have to, you don't have to imitate it. Art doesn't imitate. Art only re-expresses the feeling tone of something and then re-communicates it. So who wants to move that in a dance, the way that tree is for them? Anybody? Yes.
Okay, so it seems to be like taking its time, so like thinking, and then like when the wind comes, it's just flowing with the wind.
Wow, very nice. So does anyone else have their own expression for that tree? Sam.
The tree actually seems more like it's going like really upright, like that, like it's pointing up.
Yes.
To me it looks like it's a figure. Like it has legs and arms.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like no, like that.
Okay. All right, so that's your little dance form for that tree. Okay.
When you put a seashell up to your ear, it sounds exactly like that.
I don't think the camera people can hear the ocean right now, but it sounds as if it's as loud as putting a conch to your ear. So can you give that sound a movement?
Sort of like, because you could hear it only in the distance and nowhere near us.
Okay. So his gesture was a gesture far from him, okay, because it was far away. Okay, there's an anthropologist and a linguist who did some work with primordial languages. She studied a lot of really ancient languages, and she said the language is isomorphic with the meaning. In other words, if something was far away, like your gesture was far away, that language, speaking that language, the shape of the mouth was far away. It's like, so the sound was, instead of being short, which is right in your mouth, so a sound like dof, this was the sound went far away from the body, meaning far away from, that you had to go far away to get to that place. That was the primordial language. Earliest languages are very closely related to human instinct to make art. Language and art are actually two in the same thing, okay? Because art is a language. Ideas about the wind, using the wind as an art form expressed in sculpture or movement, yes?
Well, it's kind of like loud and then quiet and
Yes.
loud and quiet,
Okay.
so it's like
Yes.
that.
So it has rhythms and undulations. Yeah. Okay, so something else. Here's a bird. What about this bird? What do we notice about that bird? What's the quality of that bird's movements? Yes.
Its wings are really wide like this.
Yes.
So like it's using the air currents. It's relying on the air to like help it move.
Right.
So like
Yeah, beautiful. What about everyone doing some of this gliding, filling up your whole body? So a bird has to use their whole body, as the whole body is stretched, okay, in order to use those air currents, just like you said. So we just want to do some floating around and think about what this would look like in a sculpture. Does it have to be a picture of a bird, or it can just be shapes that sort of glide and undulate?
it was very like just smooth and not very jaggedy and
Yes.
just very
Very clear movement pathways. Okay, so let's do some very clear movement pathways. Okay, whatever they are to you, a really clear, distinct, flowing movement pathway. Okay. Okay, so now let's change that and just look at some jaggedy, make some jaggedy, unclear movements. Whatever that's about for you, a frenzied sort of thing. Okay, so just look around us now. Is there anything right now in nature that's speaking that sort of frenzied, jagged language? Don't know if there is. Yes?
well, right over there there's some flowers that keep like shivering really, really fast.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. What are we feeling like right now just being here in this place?
Just very like out of the common world and just into your own little
Yes.
place almost.
Right. Yeah. So just reflecting the feelings of being in this household right now.
I feel like if I just backed up into the tree line, I would just melt in with the nature and stuff.
Show us that in a movement.
So like
that
Beautiful. Very
because
nice.
it's just kind of like it all seems to fit together.
Yeah, that was very nice. Beautiful piece. That would be even a nice sculpture. I wonder what that would be if that was a sculpture, how that would be. Okay, what about you, Amelia? Do you have something?
I'm like noticing how much there's trees, and I'm a little sad that they cut it all down.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining like my form earlier. It's like representing what used to be there.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Maddie, what about you?
Oh, well, I think that it's like okay that, I mean, it's not, it's kind of nice that they cut some of the trees down because there's more field and sometimes it's healthy, but there's like only a couple trees now, so it's all straight and separate, and there's a bunch of different kinds of trees.
Want to give us a movement for that
Some of them are
feeling?
like this.
Okay. Okay, give us a movement if there was a really thick forest. What would that movement be like?
Kind of be like this
Okay.
because you have to go back and forth between the trees.
Right. And so for here, give us a really clear movement of what it's like to just have some sparse trees. What is that movement? What does that come out for you as a movement?
Kind of like flowing because
Yeah.
there's more room.
Okay. Okay, so for her first movement was sort of, she said everything was back and forth and sort of this quick sort of entanglement almost. What's that like for you, a movement of entanglement? So many things, so many branches, so many things to see and look. What kind of a feeling do you have with stones? Yes.
I think with this stone line in the land, like it's kind of different if you just put like a white picket fence, it's like
Yeah.
there.
Right.
But this, it seems more like it fits in with it.
Yes. So it's like that whole idea of the family, the household fitting itself, rather than what we've done in the modern world. We sort of disallowed or disregarded our household, that we all belong together when we make things and create human things that don't fit in our environments and hurt our environments. Okay, but those old stone walls, they fell right with the lay of the land. I was really interested in your work is because you're about the body and the body's intelligence and the body's perception, and the way the body is able to perceive the world in a natural way or in an unnatural way affects the way we can be in relationship to nature.
Right.
well, we're designed to be very attuned to nature, right?
Yes.
I mean, originally,
Yeah.
we were tribal animals,
Yes.
right? And so our awareness of prey and predators and babies and tribes mates and all that stuff and what's happening in the weather and are there's any tectonic shifts or footprints, you know. Hey, you're natural. Come here, you can be in this.
For now.
We don't live in the same context anymore, and so we really don't function in the same way anymore. And I think in modern day context, we tend to be very not attuned to our environment,
Yeah.
even to our own internal sensations, which is how we attune to the environment, right?
Yeah.
You can't feel stuff around you if you can't feel stuff
Right.
within
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
Right.
Great part of wood is that every piece is different.
Yes, it's great. It's exciting. So you have to learn to never get bored. You learn, about your own piece of wood, and your own piece of wood is going to be different in terms of the grain and how you carve it, and some parts are going to be difficult, and you just work your way around it. Like this is an old piece of pine, and you can see that there are knots here.
This helps me if I had a big vertical. Some of you have, like Sammy, you have a really tall vertical piece. Maybe you just want to tackle a part of it. And maybe instead of the whole fish, maybe a fish head or a bird head or a wing.
You just draw your image and cut away and draw it again and just keep going.
In relation to that kind of internal sensitivity, in a reality in which we evolved in an attunement, or else we wouldn't have survived.
Right.
With the natural world around us, there was a quality of communication and a quality of relationship in which indigenous peoples all over the world recognized the natural world as persons with a capital P, as one writer refers to it as an animate world, the animate world, and that a consciousness, and not only a consciousness but an organizing consciousness within groups. So the ocean has an organizing consciousness, a field has an organizing consciousness, a woodland has an organizing consciousness. And we always, as indigenous people, learned from those things, took from those things.
You know, I'm from Brooklyn. I have a very sort of, I don't know. I mean, I grew up riding subways and stuff, so I don't tend to. I don't know. I see a tree and I see dirt but that doesn't diminish those things for me. Just to see them simply, I don't necessarily see an organizing consciousness.
Well, even for a tree to survive, there's all kinds of remarkable biochemical and conscious necessities and creative acts that any one given cell has to make these decisions about what's going on. And recently I read about this botanist who was talking about that often there was these, when groves of trees would all have an abundant year of fruit. It would all happen at once instead of, because it's a large grove, so there's certain water differences and earth, soil differences and sunlight differences. So why would everything happen, all of them have an abundant year all at once? And comes to be this understanding that there's these communicative biochemical signalings that go on through, I've forgotten what it is, pheromones or something, that the signalings that happen, that communicate from tree to 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 tree, because they need to have an abundant year altogether, because that's how they perpetuate their species, okay? Because already there's lots of creatures that eat their fruit. Okay, so if just some trees, gave birth to great abundance, that there wouldn't be some left over to make more trees. So it all has to happen at once. It has to be this great abundance all at once. So there's that organizing consciousness that happens at these biochemical levels that we don't even fully understand, but we're beginning to understand more and more and more. The same way that the cell communications in our brain and in the communicator molecules in our bodies work. It's the same way that this communication and this organization is happening. So so that there's these stories that any indigenous people knew, like they were so close to how a grove of trees related to one another and was creative in the world, and animals, so that they took stories from these knowings, so that in order to guide them in the world.
Yeah.
Keep coming out. Partially it would be, but the point is used
my entire professional life and professional training, I am a scientist. I am a wildlife ecologist. I relate to nature and the world in general based on facts, which sometimes the problem, as we see with human affairs, is that people's opinions and people's perceptions are not actually supported by facts.
Yeah.
There are folks that believe, still out there, that believe the world is flat or that evolution does not occur, although those views are not supported by facts.
Well, are you saying that facts are the only true thing?
It is in fact that a perception exists, but the perception does not necessarily have to be, isn't necessarily based on truth or facts.
Okay. Well, I'd say that facts do not necessarily equal truth, because if you say that the perception and the mythology and the biology of the sun rising and going through we say that the sun comes up and goes to the mid-sky and sets and goes underneath the earth, whereas the fact is that the earth is revolving. Right. So, but we have a whole ancient and prehistorical mythology on, the sun comes and moves. But from a biological perspective, that is a true thing. Because with the sun, when the sun comes, we wake up, and when the sun goes down in the seasons. So the perception of that is based in a biological reality, which is we are very much organized and motivated by that perception. And if we fall out of that perception and don't pay attention to that perception, then we can be in trouble.
Whether we've got a heliocentric universe or an Earth-centric universe, to a certain extent, that's relational or relative. So yes,
relational is a good way to put it.
And depend on where you stand.
In relationship, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
again,
it's a relative.
Science could say, well, that's the person who's is Earth-centric is false, and the one who has to be able to go out and see the whole thing is they're true. When my position is that's not a true statement. There's truth in both things.
Yeah, I guess I would reconcile it by premising the Earth-centric view as with the term from the perspective of somebody located on Earth. This is how it appears.
Yes, or how it is perceived, biologically perceived.
Right.
across here, just to knock the first piece out, and then maybe just go right in.
Science only works on what the senses can detect, and as what's measurable, and therefore you can detect it and make observations and come to conclusions about it. But if it's not perceivable, then it's not measurable. And much of indigenous, if not all of indigenous cultures, were going more on, I mean, they're extremely practical oriented, of course they had to be, but they're also going on the spirit forces behind things which were not they are perceivable, but not by a factual perspective are they perceivable. And they're certainly not measurable. That's the one entity about those things that they're not measurable.
But I also don't want to romanticize how fully connected we ever were with nature. I think we were probably vastly more conscious of what was going on around us. But like any bunny or mountain lion, imperfectly so.
Well, that's true. I mean, and then there is a romanticism around it, but we wouldn't have mythology and folklore and stories that tell us how to live if we were perfectly attuned, if we were perfectly involved.
So there's a culture around sort of
bringing us back, reminding us, bringing us back. Okay,
and refining and improving the art of being connected.
Yes.
I think in other cultures that has been a real value.
Yeah.
And it's almost the opposite in our culture, where we see nature as something to subjugate and to take advantage of. These are resources to exploit, exactly. Rather than something that nurtures us and sustains us that we have to take care of.
Right.
Being how we honor the circles in our lives, obviously the earth being the most important, right? And then the circles that we look at through the world, our eyes and our ears. So we honor the ears with earrings, right? By decorating them, and then we show honor for our wrists. That's everything. All the circles of our body are honored. Our fingers with rings. It just makes sense, if you wear an anklet. When people would say, "Oh, Native Americans are so beautiful and their jewelry's so beautiful," well, that's because it was not to be vain. It was all for the old circle. Just really getting back to the circle, and it's like everything is what ends up being a circle and a cycle. Global warming isn't the end all and the Armageddon, I guess. I don't know. So, so there is hope. So if you just keep think of the cycle, so okay, it is a cycle. So it's bound to go back, right? It has to. It has to go back.
I'm not a person with a strong background in the beliefs of the indigenous people, although I would probably tend to think personally that they did have a much better understanding and feeling for the natural world than the vast majority of our modern population does. And even though I am a scientist, probably the closest feelings I come to spirituality are related to my experiences and with the natural world.
Hi, Miss Hadley.
Seriously? This is beautiful.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about how we were more sensate, particularly in relationship to the work you do in the vagus nerve, perhaps?
Well, for one thing, we have to be sensate to our own internal sensations, right? You can't feel anything if you can't feel your own body, right? And so the vagus nerve is this nerve that hooks up your brain to your heart and your guts, essentially. So all the organs in your belly and your breathing diaphragm and all these structures in your trunk are almost like sensors, and we have all these wires hooked up to them so that when your belly jiggles or your kidneys pulse or your bowels respond somehow to vibrations in the world around you. I mean, these are all membranes filled with fluids. So we have nerves hooked up to these jiggling membranes inside of us because they are sensors. So the first level of sensation, I think, is feeling your own internal sensations. But then I would say the second level of sensation is being able to feel other people around you, right? So my heart, if I can feel my heart, then I can feel your heart. His hearts become entrained, literally like electromagnet and magnetic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so, the heart is a pump that pumps blood, but it's also an electromagnetic organ that generates a field and has frequencies and stuff like that. And we can actually feel each other's hearts.
So do it with the mallet, and then it won't be. That's what you need to do. There you go. Much better, Claire. Much better.
Love meaning the heartfelt sense of another human being. And again,
Right.
that's a mystery. I don't
Well,
think
but
we're
not
ever
so much
going
of a mystery, right?
I don't think we're ever going to like define the heartfelt, because we do know more and more that, for instance, the heart is a brain unto itself.
It is, absolutely.
Okay, so it has an intelligence unto itself.
Yes, me too. Things don't look perfect then.
You can close down your heart. I'm not saying that's a good thing,
Yeah.
but I am saying it's a very common thing.
Yes, yeah,
So when the heart's functioning properly and it's
Yeah.
actually hooked up
Yeah.
to the brain via the vagus nerve,
yes,
there is absolutely a
yeah,
synchronization between
Yeah.
the heart and the brain.
Yeah.
And the guts and the heart and the brain.
yeah, yeah,
And even the pelvis.
Right.
And the face.
Right.
And the heart and the guts
Right.
and the brain. These are
Yes.
all
yeah,
all these little,
yeah,
sort of stations on the train line that the vagus nerve are all supposed to be hooked up and in sync.
right. And they're all brains. Like this is a brain here, and
Right.
a brain here, and a brain
They are
here.
actually literally considered brains.
Absolutely.
I would really love to be able to live without all these things, without the car, because that's the worst thing. Is what we do to the fossil fuels and our addiction to it. It's like, oh, what do we, and I wish I could just be one of those kind of people that could just go and live without it.
Yeah, we have to have the means,
Right.
Because we don't live in a world now where we grew up indoctrinated into how to negotiate and survive and to honor living, in the natural world without modern technology, without, electronic and industrial technology. It was all technology that we created, and a lot of that technology today is called art, like the technology of a clay bowl with those designs that refer back to our relationship with nature and cycles and circles in nature. That's a technology, okay, and it's a handmade technology. And we all made our own technology at one time. We all knew how to do that. Basket weaving, pottery making, all arts now. Okay? They became those things that
It's
we
not
did every
necessity
day.
anymore.
Just like you were saying, yeah, they're no longer considered necessities. They become marginalized as arts, as you said.
Yeah, and I can see that happening, like not only to indigenous people here to this land, but over in England and other places where people were honored because they were lace makers.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well, that machine can make that lace much faster than the tractors come around.
Right.
And, and then it's like, then you saw what they were seeing, the end of a life that they knew.
Yes, right.
I was like, okay, that's the last bit of people that lived close to the land. And that's scary, that Industrial Revolution was pretty much the end of it all.
Yeah, it was. The loss of our deep and honored connection with who we are, which is nature.
The machine and the railroads.
The machine took over, yeah. So it makes us insensitive.
Yeah.
Earlier landscape before the arrival of Europeans, actually even before the arrival of any humans, natural forces, things like fires caused by lightning, storms, hurricanes, salt spray, all of these created a landscape that in reality was kind of varied. It wasn't necessarily this continuous unbroken forest, because nature is constantly sort of rearranging the landscape by these different forces. What's happened in the last 100 years or so is the technological human has sort of imposed their will on the landscape and on natural processes, where fires are no longer allowed to burn long across large swaths of the landscape. So what we ecologists call natural forces, other humans call natural disasters. humans have done an awful lot, particularly in this country, to prevent natural processes from operating, and that's all well and good, but eventually the natural process gets to prevail. We fail to take into account that nature is not this steady, static condition, that nature is quite variable. And so, because we've done a lot to control those natural processes, the area that supports grassland and non-forested habitats has just been decreasing throughout this area. And so many of the different wildlife species that depend on those types of habitats have declined throughout the Northeast and throughout Cape Cod. We have the technology to replicate natural processes using things like prescribed fire, cutting, mowing, things of that sort. But the budget to do that on a grand scale is just not there. So it's a really nice happy coincidence when we have sort of dual management goals that all kind of coincide, that come together on a place like Fort Hill here, where we want to keep it open for the cultural reasons, but it also helps provide habitat for species of wildlife that need open fields.
Working on a project. Let me get her started.
Heart feeling could be a measurable scientific quantity.
It could be, but
That's not a
again,
bad thing.
I know it's not a bad thing, but again, you have to recognize what a narrow span that is. You know, we invented measuring, first of all, you know, and I mean, well, maybe not. Maybe the geometry of creation, you know, invented measuring, but they didn't measure it to do it. It's a dance of formations, of you know, the forces of things, you know, that repeat themselves over and over and over and over in the coming into form of things because of the forces that we exist in and are conscious in, you know. So, but with the heartfelt thing, so as far as back to this notion that perhaps there's a lot of romanticism around human relationship with nature, I mean, a heartfelt sense with the natural world. And that nature is so extraordinarily harsh, but at the same time so extraordinarily heartfelt. I mean, it's so totally there. I mean, if we didn't have the heartfeltness, I don't think we'd really be around.
And also, there's a huge amount of pain in nature. There's a huge amount of heart pain in nature. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
Like, people think it's really bad to feel pain. It's just life to feel pain. Your ability to feel huge amounts of pain, not just physically when you stub your toe, but when somebody dies, when you feel your child crying, for God's sake. You know, we have these intellectual ways of raising kids nowadays that completely fly in the face of what your body's telling you to do.
Exactly.
Your body might be telling you to pick up the kid.
Right.
And some book might be telling you to let the kid cry.
Yeah, and again, that's a heartfelt message.
If you ask a little kid where their brain is, they'll either say here or here. It almost never points to their heads.
Right.
Because this is where it feels like it's going on.
There's not a reciprocal relationship. Like if you go killing a whole bunch of things, then that means there's got to be less things. But this idea that there's an unlimited supply, that's we lose that sense of reciprocation. We just think there's a linear, you know, vector of manifestation that will always be there for us, rather than there's something I need to do in reciprocation with the environment that allows for sustainability.
Right. Populations do not grow infinitely. They level off and then they
cycle.
Sort of oscillate up and down because the environment is not stable. The environment is variable.
I think one of the things that the modern philosophy has been to want to make nature controllable and constant. And I think that's why we have a lot of problems.
Historically, I think there have been many people whose fortunes were made by selling the idea that nature can be controlled and nature can be held as a constant. And they've made their fortunes and moved on, and the rest of us get to inherit the cost of solving the problems. I think if one were to go back and read the newspapers and literature of the day, you'll find that there were people pointing out that these were bad ideas, but they tended to be ignored.
They tended to be ignored, they did. Just as indigenous philosophies and way of perceiving was pretty much, I don't even know if it was ignored, it just wasn't even recognized, you know.
Well, yeah.
So we lost that vital connection with sustaining our environment and ourselves.
Well, yeah, I can say there was I guess one could say a bit of arrogance on the part of the Europeans to think that they were a superior culture and that the indigenous people couldn't possibly have any idea of what things were really like, even though it was probably the indigenous people who prevented them from starving in the initial days.
I think it's that idea of reciprocation. They were given gifts by the indigenous people and they did not reciprocate. And so, you know, you lose that vital, natural reality of reciprocation. You lose your sense on the pulse of reality.
I would almost say that self-consciousness is a disease of a disconnected mammalian brain.
Very interesting.
You know, I certainly feel less self-conscious when I feel more heart and guts and connection conscious, you know.
Okay.
You're less aware of yourself and more aware of your surroundings.
That's
and
right.
more aware of
Yeah.
sensations.
Yeah, and therefore more attuned.
Yeah.
Turtles are a great example of an animal group that needs multiple habitats to complete their life cycle. Because turtles, as we know, and they can be turtles that are aquatic turtles that spend all of their time in the water for the most part, or they can be a terrestrial turtle like the box turtle. But the one thing that both of them have in common is they have to lay eggs on land, and where on land they lay their eggs is not in the woods, because they need to lay them in a place that's going to get the heat of the sun in order for the eggs to incubate and develop and hatch out before winter comes. And so where they lay their eggs is open patches of habitat. And they also need them to be in close proximity without a highway separating one from the other. Because a lot of them, a lot of them don't survive crossing the highway to get from a pond to a nesting area. And we see that with the diamondback terrapins. So you can literally have a box turtle that has lived in this area for the last 50 years, and then somebody builds a paved road through the middle of it. Now that box turtle is not going to, isn't going to stop moving across that landscape the way it has for the last 50 years, just because somebody up and built a road through what used to be his home range or its home range. It was there before the road. People around here seem to always talk about I was here first. I was here first, as if somehow all of the animals that live here weren't here before all of us.
Right, exactly.
compare it to a house. We have different rooms in a house that serve different functions, and for many different species, different habitat types serve different functions. Or another example would be, say, night herons and green herons and egrets. These are birds that we all know like to go into the salt marsh to feed. But where do they nest and raise their young? Not in a salt marsh. They build their nests in stands of trees and clumps of shrubs. There are a number of areas here on the Outer Cape where there used to be breeding colonies of these birds, but now with development having come right up to the edges of these areas, and with all the numbers of people that are moving through the area, a lot of birds that cannot endure a lot of disturbance by human beings have been basically run off the Outer Cape.
Physical reality is an incredibly, almost incalculably rich ocean that we're all swimming in, you know?
Right.
And to describe it accurately is, it's an impossibility. In other words, you have to be exactly the same size and the same complexity as the universe to describe the universe accurately. So there's no way to make
I
it
agree.
smaller, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, it doesn't diminish anything to see it as physical, you know? I don't sense or need to sense anything bigger or simpler or purer underneath or behind anything. Because to me, there's nothing more beautiful or pure than a wave or a sound or a, dappling of sunlight on leaves, To me, that's primary. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
And so you don't have a heartfelt sense that you're, I don't know really what to call it because it is such a mystery, but indigenously, that there's an attunement and a belonging that's heartfelt with that wave and the dappled light on the leaves.
I do have that heartfelt sense.
Okay.
And I believe, sort of as a scientist, that there's selective advantage in having that heartfelt sense. Like that subjective sense that I am here and this is my place and these are my people and these are my trees and this is my sun. The more connected I feel to those things, the better I survive. So as an animal, there's a real advantage to feeling that heart connected to everything.
But is it solely about survival, or is it about the experience of the extraordinariness?
It's solely about survival.
Because we're totally off there. I don't meet you there, because to me, just to survive empty of things is not worth surviving.
But how is it empty?
To survive for the purpose of being attuned with the wave and the dappled light off the trees, that's the reason. That was nice, you just looking up at it.
kind of hard to do, isn't
I
it?
can't.
that we're trying to restore by thinning trees that would restore the view from the historic Captain Edward Penniman House out to the east and southeast towards Nauset Marsh and Town Cove.
And the horse chestnut tree there, which historically I think was one of many along that roadside, and that's the last one, and that is my horse chestnut tree, by the way, and that's what this program is named after, Becky's tree. And I used to climb that tree as a child and write poetry and ride the windstorms in the branches, and I had an epiphany there concerning my struggle with elementary school, which was traumatic, and I realized that it wasn't my problem. It wasn't about me. It was about the school system, and that's what led me to actually end up getting a doctorate in education. So it's very much based in the natural world, our relationship with the natural world, and natural processes of learning and being in the world. And so this piece interests me because it kind of fits into that, because it is about the natural world and it is about my territory.
Well, now we know to preserve that horse chestnut.
Yeah, I'm glad.